You brought up the margin tax. Senator Ogden at the beginning of the session floated the possibility of tweaking, that was I think his word, or that was at least a characterization of his point of view, tweaking the margins tax, which would ultimately cause more revenue to come in, but somebody would have to pay for it, and your colleague Chairman Pitts is among those who believes that any tweak of the margins tax is actually a tax increase. Can you tell us how you feel about that?
Well, we tweaked it last session and it brought in less money. And I'm not
we
one...
should untweak it.
Well, we extended the limits for small business before it would apply. I think threshold is $1 million.
Right.
I don't see an appetite in the House for making major revisions to the margins tax in the next 82 days.
Right.
But I also don't defend the status quo. I also think that we are due a report from the comptroller as to why it's performing the way it is. And so we'll react when we have all the information.
But if on the one hand, Mr. Speaker, it's not performing the way that it is, and many people believe, and even if you don't necessarily believe it or are willing to say it here today, that it has resulted in a permanent or semi-permanent deficit. But on the other hand, we don't have the appetite to tweak it. Aren't we just shielding our eyes from reality?
Well, the margins tax behavior isn't the only reason that we're coming up with less revenue. We had a significant dip in sales taxes, which we're heavily reliant on.
Right.
I noticed yesterday that for the 11th month in a row, those sales tax figures are going the right way. They're coming back up. So to isolate just the margin tax and blame a shortfall of revenue on that, I think isn't really the point I was trying to make. But we should take a full review. I think every interim we should take a full review of revenue and spending.
Yeah.
And but in the 82 days left in this session, I think we have our hands full. Just putting together, solving the current deficit, putting together a 2-year budget that funds essential services and balances.
So
without raising taxes.
You're not optimistic about the tweak then, or any sort of tweak that's been floated?
Well, I mean, I never say don't look at something, and Senator Ogden's a smart guy. I don't know exactly what he has in mind, but I don't see an increase in taxes as likely in the House.
Well, when you say, I never say don't look at something, I wonder if all tax increases would qualify as something else as well, that you say never don't look at that. You know, on the Senate side, Senator Deuel is one Republican who has floated the possibility of a 10-cent increase in the gasoline tax. I mean, it's a session in which we have at least some Republicans talking openly about the possibility of tax increases. Your Ways and Means Chairman, Mr. Hildebrand, basically took taxes off the table within the last couple of days, said we're not going to have a tax bill, full stop. You support that position?
Taxes must start in the House.
Right.
And Representative Hildebrand's chairman of Ways and Means for a reason.
Right. So there's not going to be there will not be a tax bill coming out of the House.
I don't see it. Yeah, no.
So that is something.
They cannot originate in the Senate. They can talk about it.
I mean, Senator Deuel can talk about anything he wants, right? But in the end, it's ultimately going to come out of the House. So are you saying categorically today that there will not be a tax bill out of the House?
I don't see one, no. We campaigned against taxes going back over a year ago. I went to the Appropriations Committee to make the point that this budget coming up and the budget we are in are under serious pressure.
Right.
And I meant what I said about being creative, look at every option, put every option on the table, except raising taxes.
Right.
We're in a fragile recovery around this country and in Texas. And I think the last thing you want to do when you're rebuilding jobs and rebuilding your economy and growing back is to raise taxes.
So even though at the federal level, a true conservative like Senator Coburn from Oklahoma, who has come out and said, given the nature of the federal economic situation, we cannot responsibly take taxes off the table, that would conceivably give Republicans in Texas cover if they wanted it. You don't see the situation here being similar to the federal one where you've got to keep all options open?
I don't see it as similar at all. I think the way Texans have governed ourselves is so far different from the way the federal government has governed the country in fiscal matters that I don't see any comparison at all. I think last month, I think I saw where in February, perhaps it was the largest single month of deficit spending ever in our federal government, $220 billion maybe in 1 month. And so I think that the definition of crisis is what you see when a senator like Coburn says we ought to look at everything, including taxes.
You
But
don't-
in
you don't
Texas,
con-
we are not in that condition by a long way.
You don't consider a potential $30 billion budget shortfall to be a crisis?
No, I don't think it's a crisis. I think it's a challenge, and I think we'll meet it, making tough decisions. And I'm not minimizing the tough choices that we have to make.
Yeah.
But the reason that we're in relatively better shape in our economy than other states is because we've been very prudent over time and not over-obligating ourselves to expenses that we can't maintain.